Welcome to This Is Not About Your Body, where we talk about all the real shit body image issues are actually about, because they're never just about the way you look. I'm your host, Jessie Neal, and today I have with me Dr. Asher Larmie, who uses they, them pronouns and is a transgender, non-binary general practitioner and fat liberationist who is campaigning for an end to medical weight stigma. They have over 20 years of medical experience and have been fat for even longer than that. And they are the founder of the #NoWay campaign. And Dr. Asher is also the host of the Fat Doctor podcast and runs a number of training courses to help health professionals, employers, and organizations do less harm through weight discrimination. And I've just been a huge fan of their work for a really long time. So welcome, Asher.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this. I'm really all worked up. Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. So I'm just going to have you talk a little bit about your own story and how you came to do what you do now.
Right. Every time I answer this question, it changes. I'm always very curious to know where it will go. So you said, like I said, I've been fat since I was not so much as a kid. I was like a chubby kid, but I wasn't a child that would have necessarily been isolated and singled out and said, you need to go on a diet. Although maybe I did have maybe I was overweight or whatever. We didn't measure it back then. I'm very old. I was a child in the 1980s. And so I'm so sorry for anyone that's like, I was a child in the 1970s. How are you calling us old? Yeah, sorry. No, but we didn't measure BMI in children until the 2000s. So I was a relatively chubby kid who became a fat adult. And that's probably in part to do with the fact that I was on a diet since I was a kid. And I grew up with a mother who was very preoccupied with my weight because she was very preoccupied with her weight. And I think that is such a common story. It's probably more common than it's not common, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I went to medical school. I graduated in 2003. I believed everything I was told because my mother had told me that, and then medical school had confirmed it. And so as far as I was concerned, being fat was bad. It was unhealthy. Yeah. It was wrong. It was morally wrong. It was reprehensible even. And so, I grew up kind of feeling massively ashamed, but also being very much part of the system that stigmatizes and people and recommends weight loss. So I've been prescribing weight loss for a really long time, folks. And I'm doing my penance now because I hit. So it was 2020. It was the pandemic. I went, I guess, through a midlife crisis and spurred on by the pandemic and started blogging. And I was doing a weight loss blog. That is what I started doing. And it became very apparent soon after I started my blog that A, I wasn't any good at weight loss, and B, the weight loss was, am I allowed to swear? Because I have
yes,
to.
Please,
okay,
swear away.
So weight loss was a load of bullshit, and it's not a real thing. It's not something that I can sustain. And I think I snapped. I think I was in that, we were in a very precarious, vulnerable place in 2020. Yeah. I was working through the pandemic. I was working face to face with COVID patients, and we were watching patients, we were doing a lot of palliating of patients. So I was watching people die constantly. And it was really getting to me. And then there was that fear that I was going to die, that I was going to be one of those fat doctors that died. So I think that's when I started reading and becoming curious, and I was very lucky. A whole group of really amazing people came alongside me and tried to one of my closest friends and one of, I guess, not my oldest friends, but one of the first fat liberationists I met was Jeanette. She's the mindset nutritionist. And I often say to her, she's had the patience of a saint, because she would come in and sort of go, oh, hey, have you ever considered? And I'd be like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And then she'd come back, but have you ever looked at? And I'd be like, no, you're talking rubbish. And then eventually she got through to me. I started learning about intuitive eating and anti-diet. That's how I entered this. And I think that's how a lot of people enter it. That kind of diets don't work. Let's try something new. And that's great. But it soon became apparent that weight stigma, especially medical weight stigma, was hugely problematic and was fueling a lot of the kind of hatred that we have for ourselves and the hatred that everybody has for their body. Let's face it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody is tempted to go on a diet, no matter what they look like. It's an everybody thing. And I thought, hang on a second, I'm part of a medical profession that is causing harm here. I should probably do something about it. And my feeling was, let me go find the doctors that are doing something about it, and I'll just join the cause. That was the plan. And then I looked for them, and I looked some more, and then I looked some more, and I was like, there don't seem to be that many doctors talking about this. In fact, the only doctor that I could find at the time was a straight-sized kind of white male who is great, and I have
Is that
we're
Dr.
friends.
Josh?
Yeah, Josh and I, we're friends.
Yeah.
And but perhaps didn't have the same experiences that I had, and
Sure.
perhaps was coming at it from a slightly different angle. And I was just like, okay, so it's just me and Josh.
Yeah.
what what happens now? And of course in the UK there are some wonderful Hayes doctors in the US as well. There are brilliant people doing brilliant things, and maybe not so publicly, but
Yeah.
I have a big mouth, and I'm not easy to tame or to keep quiet. So once your eyes are opened, you cannot close them again. So I went from weight loss blogger in 2020 May to where I am right now. And during that time, I came to a place of body acceptance, then to a place of body trust and body love. But it's the trust actually that's been beautiful for me, is actually realizing and appreciating what a wonderful body I have.
Yeah.
And there ain't nothing wrong with it. And then that actually pushed me into accepting, finally coming to terms with my gender identity, which I had been hiding for my whole entire life. So then that kind of happened, and then I had the privilege, or I continue to have the privilege, of being surrounded by an incredible group of predominantly Black and trans activists, queer activists who are, very much involved in fat liberation, but are coming at it from the kind of social justice perspective, that they're coming at it from that intersectional social justice. This isn't just about no diets, which is great, but there's more to it than that. So I've just had the pleasure of being able to connect with and learn from so many incredible people. I'm so, it's just such a, I'm going to say blessing, just to be surrounded by that. And so I've learned an awful lot in a really short period of time. I'm just proud to be part of that now, that movement.
Oh, so cool. I did not realize how recent it was, actually. That is a very condensed timeline for some of the work I took like a decade to go through. Good Lord. You must feel like you just had like the rug ripped out from under you.
Did. And it's because I came into it at the right time. I don't think people, I keep saying to people, something's happening, something's changing. I know that people have been working on this since the 1960s. I know people have been pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. But I'm, maybe I'm just naive, but I'm starting to feel like there is enough information and there are enough people working towards liberation that I think when I came into it, I was like, I'm an open book, I'm an open sponge, and I could absorb so much of it. It didn't take that much time because there's so much out there that I could just like a sponge, suck it all up and then just go, right, okay, I'm ready. So that's great.
That's true. There is such a huge explosion of resources on this stuff. I guess when I started, it was pretty much like the Intuitive Eating book, Health at Every Size, the original.
Yeah.
And I was a personal trainer, so I came from the fitness industry. I definitely did a lot of the same thing, where some of my followers would be like, hey, Jessie, have you read anything about how diets actually don't work? And I'm like, no. All I know is that it comes down to hard work and willpower and maybe good genetics. And that was it. And it definitely took me a while to get on board. And once I did, like you said, there is no going back.
Right. But
once you see it, you're like, oh.
Okay. But so many people have done so much hard work already. I feel almost embarrassed to say that I take credit now for all the hard work that everyone else has done. I work really closely with people like Reagan Chastain, and Reagan just, I don't think, people will often say, oh, you should follow the fat doctor and follow Reagan. And I'm on no. See, Reagan's my teacher. Follow Reagan. I basically just follow Reagan because everything she says is what I learned. So, and it's not just Reagan. There's so many people that I'm like, I don't want to appear to be taking credit for their amazing work because they've already done all the hard work. The difference, I think, with me is I know the ins and outs of the medical profession in a way that perhaps other people, just because they don't come from the same profession.
It's really unique.
Right. And I think that puts me in a position where I perhaps, and I'm beginning to see it more as a battle, as a war, as a sort of strategy for attack. I don't want people to think I'm attacking doctors, but I'm getting to the point where I'm not attacking individuals, but the organization, the medical organization. I think that actually we need to attack it. We need to dismantle so many things, and we have to be strategic about it. And I think the difference is maybe because I've been in that profession for 20 years, I have some insight in how it works and what my colleagues are like, and how to, I hate to say this, but I spend a lot of time training people on how to advocate for themselves and how to get their doctors on side, which is, awful, but necessary. And I think that's when I realized, oh, people don't know this, because why would they, unless they became a doctor? Like, why would you know that that's what we do? So that's where I feel.
Okay, so I'm going to have you dive in a little bit. Just I want you to start because you work a lot with re-educating medical professionals about the impact and harm of weight stigma. I want to have you define weight stigma for the listeners, and then talk a little bit about the ways that it actually shows up in the medical system.
Right. So we all have our biases, our beliefs about a lot of stuff, right? And when it comes to fatness, there are general kind of attitudes, beliefs, judgments, stereotypes that we all have of fat people. Fat people are lazy. Fat people lack self-control. Fat people need to work harder. They, blah, 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 blah. And that in itself is problematic. But weight stigma shows up when those stereotypes and beliefs and judgments actually impacts our day-to-day life. And I say our as in like society collectively. So it's not just that people think that fat people are lazy, it's that people think that fat people are lazy and therefore don't want to give them a job, or don't want to, invite them onto their team or be friends with them or go on a date with them, or like whatever it is, it's actually physically impacting our lives. And what it's doing is it's excluding us from certain parts of society. And those are often the parts of society where the most amount of wealth and sort of capital and influence and social standing and all the things that people need to thrive exists. So we're being excluded. So it can be a little thing like, okay, I want to go and buy a nice outfit so that I can go to a party or a wedding or to, for work. And so what do? I go to a store, and if you're a regular sized person, you go into a store and you find the outfit that you like. But if you're in a bigger body, then you have to go and, seek out the plus size section of the store. And then if you're in a bigger body, the plus size section of the store isn't going to serve you, sell you clothes. You've got to go to a specialized store. And if you're in an even bigger body, you can't even get clothes from the specialized store. You either have to buy them online or have them specially made. So we're excluding people from society. And when you're shopping from the plus size section, the clothes aren't as nice, they're not as fun, and they don't make you feel as good about yourself. So already that's a small amount of exclusion, but the bigger you are, the more you're excluded. In the healthcare setting, it's less subtle and more really, really obvious. So it's the moment you step into the doctor's office, place of work, it's the posters on the wall that tell you that you're fat and you're dying. It's the, have you considered pursuing weight loss? It's the, sign up here for this weight management class. It's the blood pressure cuff that doesn't fit. It's the gown that doesn't fit. It's the nurse that makes you stand on the scales before they even say hello. It's the doctor that, you walk in and is taken one look at you and it's clear they're judging you. They're not even trying to hide it. The doctor that doesn't listen to you, doesn't take you very seriously, brushes you off, doesn't examine you, doesn't investigate you, doesn't refuses to treat you. And then it gets worse. You see, all of these things, they're little things, they build up, but then it gets worse, because then it gets to the point where they're like, well, you need to go and lose weight. That's going to fix your symptoms, which is a lie, and is going to make things worse rather than better. Or they say, I'm not going to give you your treatment unless you lose weight, which is even worse, because not only is it causing harm, but it's also taking away people's autonomy. It is removing your agency. It's dangerously close to robbing somebody of their right to consent. And that's really tricky territory now. We're talking about assault, we're talking about trauma. And it gets worse, because sometimes doctors joke at people, sometimes they scoff at them, sometimes they say, oh, well, you've lost your appetite, really? You've lost scoff, you could stand to lose a few pounds. They'll get even worse. They'll poke you, literally poke your fat. There was one woman who said she was having a pap smear, and the doctor was literally legs akimbo. Doctor was right in there, and then looked up, poked her I think it was her thighs or her abdomen, and said, "You need to get rid of this. This isn't attractive. This is really unpleasant." Can you imagine in
Oh,
the middle of a pap smear? I mean,
oh my God.
we all know what that feels like to be in that situation, but see, that's trauma. You're walking away from there and you're traumatized. You're not going
Yeah,
back to see your
that's
doctor.
so, oh God, my skin just like
Yeah. Yeah.
fled my body.
Right. And I remember when she told me this, I I sort of said, no, there was a moment where I was thinking, no, that couldn't have happened. Like that doesn't happen.
Right.
And then I was like, no, it does. You see, it's worse than that, because
Yeah.
sometimes, and see, this is it's escalating now. We
Yeah.
went from a poster on the wall that was a bit offensive and a gown that didn't fit, to a doctor ignoring our symptoms, to a doctor making fun of us, to a doctor abusing and traumatizing us. There's worse. I deal with people all the time whose diagnoses were missed.
Yeah.
Sarah Jane is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking stories, and I've talked about it on the podcast, I've spoken about it online before. Sarah Jane went to see her doctor in 2017 with a loss of appetite and abdominal pain. And as a doctor, I will tell you that is an instant red flag. And you are expected to examine, investigate, do tests. Like that is your duty of care. There is no reasonable doctor wouldn't do that. She went for 2 years complaining of the same thing, and all she was told was, "Good for you. Weight loss is what you need. Keep going." By the time she was literally on her knees, unable to eat anything, she was dehydrated. She was in crippling pain. But they kept saying to her, "Well, you can't be losing weight. Look at you. You're getting bigger and bigger." Turns out that she was getting bigger and bigger because she had a 20 centimeter by 20 centimeter by 20 centimeter ovarian cancer sitting in her abdomen. And it took a further 4 months where she was humiliated over and over again. She had to go for an MRI scan, but the MRI scan doesn't fit fat people. So when fat people need an MRI, it's tough. 8 weeks she waited for them to humiliate her and say, "You're too fat for this machine." 8 weeks whilst a cancer was growing inside her body. She was forced to do an exercise tolerance test, which is like when you get on a bike, an exercise bike,
Yeah.
for 30 minutes. She could
Wait,
barely move at this point in time because of the cancer. The tumor took up her entire abdomen. They forced her to do that. I have never, ever, ever in the history of all time heard of a cancer patient being forced to do an
yeah,
ECG.
what would be the good Lord?
And that was just to be told that she had a 20% chance of dying on the table. And if she had cancer, what difference does it make? Like, she's going anyway.
Yeah.
She's like, "Look, you've got to take it out. You can't leave it in there. Take it out. If it's a risk, it's a risk." She was in hospital. She's one of the quickest recoveries I've ever heard of from the operation that she had. She was in ITU for about 6 hours, less than 12, I think.
Crap.
She was out of hospital within 5 days after having this incredible surgery. She recovered so well, but that's not the point, because by the time they took that tumor out, she was stage 3 and it was incurable. And she was given 4 years, and that was 2019, and it's 2023. And that is where the worst case scenario when it comes to weight stigma. And it's heartbreaking, but Sarah Jane's not the first person to have this story. In fact, we have a mutual friend called Deborah who died last year from the exact same thing. And when I talk to people about this, that, they find it hard to believe that this is happening. This is happening every single day. And missing a cancer is pretty, is a pretty big deal, but it doesn't have to be cancer. It could be anything. It could be something as small as, high blood pressure. If we're missing your blood pressure because we don't have the right cuff to use on you, or more importantly, what often happens is that people are afraid to go back to their doctor. So they sit at home. They sit at home with a cough or with a funny looking freckle or mole that's growing, and they sit at home with COVID, which is what they did. And there's a study that came out now finally, thankfully, that has made it very clear that having fat had absolutely no bearing on COVID deaths. But we know that being fat causes treatment delays for 2 reasons. One, because people are afraid to go to the doctor, and 2, because doctors don't treat their fat patients. They leave their fat patients. And especially with things like shortness of breath. Shortness of breath is your classic, are they short of breath or are they just unfit because they're fat?
Yeah.
So they leave it. And so people die. The worst case scenario when it comes to weight stigma is people are dying, and it's happening all the time. But there is no, like, it's all bad. You don't have to have died for it to be bad. You could still, you're being traumatized right from the beginning, right from that stupid poster. That is in of itself something that I'm fighting against, and everything from that point onwards.
Absolutely. Holy crap, what a journey that was. Like, I have conversations like these all the time, and I talk about weight stigma and the anti-fat bias and everything on here all the time, and I still just got so uncomfortable hearing those stories that I'm like, So one thing that I want to ask about this is, how conscious is it, do you think, in the minds of the doctors perpetuating this kind of harm? How deep in the consciousness or subconsciousness are we looking at?
So that's a really interesting question. I can give you some science. There was a study that was done on medical students, but I think that's good enough. Medical students are future doctors, and it was done in 2015. So they're definitely doctors now. They looked at anti-fat bias, and they found that 75% of medical students had implicit, unconscious anti-fat bias, but 2/3 of medical students had explicit, so conscious bias that they're aware of and do not care to address. So the question of whether or not it's how conscious it is in the minds of doctors, when it comes to bias, I think that's very clear. 2/3 of medical students stroke doctors have explicit bias, and this is reproduced in many studies, different numbers and different studies, but we know that people have both explicit views, in other words, fat people are lazy, like they genuinely believe that fat people are lazy. They genuinely, I mean, what horrifies me is that most of my colleagues, my medical colleagues with, years of medical school and learning about science and evidence and reading medical journals and stuff, still genuinely believe in the whole calories in, calories out argument. Like they genuinely think. They have not heard of genetics, epigenetics, gut biomy,
How
the
is that
insulin
possible?
pathway.
The research is out there. I don't understand.
This is what I say to my, I said, I list words, genetics, epigenetics, gut biomy, the insulin pathway, stress and allostatic load. Do you need me to keep going? Because I can. There's another 10, 15 things that I can say to you. And the studies are out there. How can you still think calories in, calories out is a thing? And I talk to them about the physiological process of starvation. And when I say starvation, they kind of go, we're not talking about starvation. I was like, really? Because the Minnesota starvation experiment, the definition of starvation for them was 1,600 calories. You're recommending 800 calories to your patients. What do you want to call that when they're eating less than they consume? What other word would you like to use? And they'll go, but they're fat, they can't starve. And I'm like, how can you be so ignorant? Did you not did you not learn the same stuff I did at medical school? Because there's no logic here, and this is cognitive dissonance, and I think this is something that we really need to understand. When you have been indoctrinated with this stuff from birth, essentially, because we learn anti-fat bias from birth, but then you go to medical school and you get further indoctrinated. By the time you get to the state where we're in now, where anti-fat bias is rife, and it's not just that, but we've got weight loss drugs and weight loss companies are also influencing the narrative, and there's so much stuff going on. The cognitive dissonance is real, and by that I mean you believe one thing to be true, and then someone comes along and says this study completely disproves what you believe. And doctors just refuse to accept it. So they call me a quack, a charlatan. What is it that they use now? There's a term like a grifter. I'm
It is a popular word, a grifter.
Yeah,
what are you grifting?
Yeah.
Grifting liberation.
I often say it's not paying me any money, so I don't know what I'm grifting. But they say that I'm cherry picking the data, that they assassinate my character. They might, instead of just going, wow, that's an actual study, that's a systematic review that looks at over 30 randomized studies and has got a meta-analysis. That's actually really good evidence. Maybe I should take a little look at that and see what it shows. But they just don't.
So cognitive dissonance, is that what you were talking about? Yeah. So cognitive dissonance is when there's like sort of a disconnect between something that you believe and some kind of proof
Yes.
to the contrary,
Otherwise,
whatever,
yeah.
evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we end up just going with the thing we believe and ignoring the thing that contradicts it. You could also call this confirmation bias.
You could,
It happens all the time. Is this, in your opinion, how the medical field continues to teach doctors? Like, is that how it's being reinforced? Because if they all learned all the same stuff, how is this happening?
And it's complex, isn't it? Because I think there's something to be said about how doctors are taught anyway. There's something to be said about the kind of people who are attracted to medicine. We're not all the same. I mean, I went into medicine because I grew up I had a Jewish mum. She told me that when I was 3, I told her I wanted to be a doctor. And I don't know how, but somehow that meant I was going to become a doctor, and I never thought about becoming anything else. And that's your typical,
oh my
I
gosh.
think that's your classic Jewish mum kind of tactic, is like, my daughter, the doctor. So that was, that's why I became, but I also really wanted to help people. I look back now and I realized that if I had actually done, I don't know what I would have done, but I probably would have been more comfortable being a nurse than a doctor. And the reason I say that is because nurses generally, go into their profession to help people. To a degree, doctors do it as well. But I think there's also a lot of status associated with medicine. And there's a lot of power in medicine. And if you're the kind of person that's attracted to power and status, I hate to say it, but you head into the medical profession. Now, not everybody. And I will say that there are certain groups of people or groups of doctors that are far less likely to do that. Like, so for example, if you look at Black doctors, very small proportion of doctors, but many of them will approach the medical profession with a much more like a kind of like, I want to help the people who have been struggling for a really long time. I want to be that doctor that can help my kids. That's very different to a lot of the doctors that you'll meet who perhaps have fathers or mothers that were doctors or perhaps are very privileged. So a lot of my colleagues, I hate to say it, come from very privileged backgrounds. They are not interested in social justice. They will never learn about social justice. Social justice doesn't bother them. The only time they seem to be bothered about social justice is when they're talking about how much money they get paid. That's in the UK. And I'm not suggesting—
Are most doctors Republicans? This is blowing my mind right now. Probably, right?
Oh, I mean, in the US,
yeah.
How many doctors do you know that are? Well,
I don't know any doctors.
I think there are also the Democrats. There are the Democrats who are kind of like who cherry pick.
Sure,
like the
liberals, middle of the road,
somewhere in the middle. But yeah, a lot of my colleagues are, I'm sorry to say it, but are racist and have very, really very old-fashioned and quite offensive views on gender and homosexuality. And
Ashley, this is blowing my mind because—
did you not know that?
Well, I don't know any doctors. I guess, I sort of whatever peripherally, but I don't, it's not a population of people that I have a lot of connection with. So no, I don't think I ever really put together the way that I certainly think about all the time with like politicians who's drawn to politics, people with privilege who are able to like spend the money and the time getting elected. And then also people who want to reinforce those systems and are really craving power, who's drawn to being a police officer. In my hometown, I know exactly who they were. And they were boys who wanted power, right? Like I've thought about this in so many areas, but never doctors. And my mind is just being blown right now. Like, of course, there's a certain kind of person drawn to it.
Of course. And I think I actually do, I've done this. It was a keynote speech that I did, I think it was last year for the Weight Stigma Conference, and one that I often give in some shape or form, which is basically just explain how doctors have been on the wrong side of history for as long as modern medicine has existed. And I don't think people quite understand that the birth of modern medicine, of course, medicine has existed for all time, but I'm talking about the profession that we know now. It began with eugenics. It began with race science. It began as a way to literally oppress Black people and then fat people, because the medical profession has been used to cause harm to fat people and to separate fat people, disabled people. Who do you think was doing all the horrific stuff during the Nazi regime? The stuff that you're just like, I knew Nazis were sick, but this is beyond sick. They were doctors. They were doctors who were literally performing the most atrocious human experiments. in Nazi Germany. They were doctors, and doctors have been on the wrong side of history continuously. I can take you through one day, you know, people that are ever interested, I might do this lecture for everyone.
Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating. But doctors are not good people. Now, again, you know, when I say they're not good people, it's like saying, I don't trust men. Of course, there are some men that I trust. We're not talking about individuals, and I know some really great doctors, but if I'm honest with you, I don't know that many. And if I had to talk about like percentages, I would say less than 10%. And 90% of them are pretty horrendous. And, you know, some of them, they're the worst kinds. I remember there's a speech, there's the letter that Martin Luther King wrote from, I think it was Birmingham, when he was in prison, and he talks about the white moderate, and how like moderates sometimes, you know, I mean, I can't recount the letter, the speech enough, but this idea that moderates are perhaps sometimes the worst enemy of any justice or social justice movement, because they appear to be on your side. They appear to be, like you said, liberal, but they're not. Deep down inside, they're very much enjoying the power that they have. And so when I talk about this, I say, yeah, there's indoctrination and there's, you know, there's bias, and we all grow up with that. But also, when you're in a position of privilege, what do? You hold on to that privilege for as much as you can. And so doctors are very privileged. Whoever they are almost certainly going to be white or you know, perhaps Asian, but less likely to be like Latino or Black. They're more likely to come from wealthy backgrounds. They're more likely to have had a good education, maybe have parents that have at least a degree, perhaps beyond a degree, that, you know, they're likely. So they've come from privileged backgrounds. And I don't know many friends that like didn't even have like a private school education. Oh, and by the way, that's me I'm talking about. I'm white. I went to private school. I have so much fucking privilege. I am one of those people. But I guess you know, there are a few people that just kind of go, I'm going to use my privilege for good. And I think most people go, I quite like having my privilege and I'll hold on to it. So yeah, when you think of politicians and police officers, you need to put doctors in there, and specifically doctors. I don't think I don't think any other healthcare profession is as bad. Like, I don't put like nurses and
right,
you know,
because I know a ton of nurses and I don't see this at all. That's so freaking interesting. Holy crap. Okay, so the way that I've always thought about it, because the research that I've been exposed to just sort of drew my attention, was more to the researchers behind the biased studies. And also the corporations behind the biased researchers, et cetera, et cetera. So I've never just straight up thought about the doctors before. And this is like having such a weird impact on my brain.
So I had like a run-in when I first joined social media, because that's the other thing you have to know about me. I started blogging in 2020, but I also joined social media in 2020. I had avoided, like I had like a Facebook account. One Facebook account that I never posted on, and that was it. So social media was all very new to me, and I think, you know, I was learning, as you have to. There's politics in social media, isn't there? And I kind of had a run-in with this doctor, and I'm going to name and shame him because he deserves to be. He's in the news now, so it's fine. His name is Dr. Spencer Nadolski.
Yes,
you know Spencer Nadolski.
I did back in my fitness days. That's so weird. Like he was like in my training inner circle of. Yeah, he was like one step removed from me, but he was like the mentor to my mentors. You know what I mean?
Well, Dr. Spencer Nadolski and I had a run-in a while back. I also had a run-in with, I only know the bad name I call him. Oh gosh, something Lane. What's it's Bio Lane is the okay.
These were this is so weird for the fitness
I
industry.
hope I don't upset you now, because
I won't be upset. I left the industry anyway, but you know, that's just weird. This was close.
So Spencer and I had an argument right at the beginning because you know, on the surface he seemed not to be as judgy as some people were, and you know, he promoted weight loss and fitness in a way that was kind of, you know, if you weren't looking close enough, you'd actually think maybe he was on side and he was a nice guy and he was great. But I just was just like, this is bullshit. I'm sorry, I think you're lying to people and you need to stop. So we got into it, and at the time I was a nobody knew who I was, and I had like, I don't know, like a few hundred followers on Instagram, and I don't think I knew what I was getting myself into.
Yeah.
But over my career, and I've had now 3 different Instagram accounts because they've been taken down by Insta, and I've had to start again. So I'm on number 3. So obviously he'd block me, and then like I get a new account, and then I'd see him again, and then he'd block me. So most recently, we were talking about the American pediatrics guidelines, right? The ones that came out that were recommending weight loss drugs to children. And I was, I was desperately worried about this. And I've spoken about this on multiple occasions. But I saw a video of Dr. Nadolsky saying, everybody needs to calm down. These drugs are fine for children. So I did a stitch of his video and was just like, just FYI, people, this is how much money Spencer Nadolsky has taken from Novo Nordisk. And I got blocked again.
Is that the company that makes the drugs?
The drugs, yeah.
And how did you know how much money he made?
It's online. It's right there for everyone to see. And he said, oh, come on now, it's just a few lunches. And my point has always been, look, a lot of doctors are taking lunch, going to conferences, being wined and dined. And it doesn't look like a lot of money. It's not like millions of dollars. It's a couple of grand. It's nothing in the grand scheme of things. But they are indoctrinated by these drug companies, and often are in cahoots with these drug companies. And I made it very clear, do not trust any doctor that takes money from any drug company. I don't care if it's free lunch. I have never taken a penny. I may, if I'm honest with you, have eaten a sandwich once or twice and maybe taken a pen, because I always run out of pens when I was on the ward, and like you'd get to your grand rounds and you'd just be like, I'm going to take that sandwich and that pen. But that's the most I've ever taken for a drug company. Anybody who is willing to take money from a drug company is willing to accept that drug companies are influencing the medical profession and are and they are willing to be part of that very corrupt system. But here's the kicker. A few weeks later, I read an article that says Weight Watchers has taken this company, and I've forgotten the name of the company now, but they've taken over a company that is basically prescribing these weight loss drugs, telephone consultations. So they've taken over the company. So I actually look into the company. Guess whose name I find?
Spencer.
$130 million. Yeah.
Is what, how much the company's worth?
That's how much Weight Watchers bought it for. And it's his company.
So, my God.
So he has a huge following he's a massive influencer on social media. He's also a doctor that has set up when these drugs were first released, and he was talking about it. And I was like, don't trust this guy. He is financially motivated to sell you these drugs. And he kept like sending his fans at me and calling me all sorts of names and, basically slagging me off. I kept saying, don't trust this doctor. And everyone kept going, I don't know what's wrong with you. You just want, you're just craving fame. You just want the numbers. And I was like, no, when will someone prove me right? And then he proved me right by selling his company for 130 million, but nobody cares. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that this guy, people were praising him, and like they were doctors on Twitter who were like, well done, dude, you've done really well. I'm so proud of you. And I was thinking, but what about all the people he's harming? Because these weight loss drugs are so dangerous. They're so dangerous, and it's money. So that's the other thing that we have to remember, is that doctors are indoctrinated and they are biased, and a lot of it is unconscious bias, but some of it is also conscious bias that they refuse to do anything about. B, the kind of people that go into medicine are not necessarily the kind of people that you want to be looking after your health. And C, there's a lot of money to be made in not being ethical, in being unethical. To be a doctor like me, I'd be lucky to make $50,000 a year. If I'm really lucky, I can make that much money. But if I'm Spencer, I can make $130 million by selling a company. And you know how easy that would have been for me? Just to prescribe these drugs, like that's so much easier. But you have to have a bit of ethics. And I'm not trying to say I'm perfect, 'cause I'm not perfect, but you have to have ethics.
You did eat that sandwich.
I did. And I took that pen. It wasn't just one pen. It would have been more than one pen. I'm not going to lie. It's probably 10 pens.
The other guy's name is Lane Norton.
Yes.
And I knew both of these guys. So this is very interesting to me on a personal level. Not surprising in the slightest, but
Mm.
just yeah, the idea that, first of all, it must have been kind of satisfying to be proved right. Like, obviously not good because F that guy and all of this harm, but like also a little bit satisfying after getting all the trolls thrown at you.
It would have been, yeah, it would have been more satisfying if his name had been in the press. It was basically the
Right.
name of
Yeah.
the
If he got
company.
dragged
Like
for it.
I wanted him to be dragged. He didn't get dragged, but no,
Ah,
it was good to know it. You know what it was? It wasn't satisfactory. It was knowing that my instincts were right. And for a really long
yes.
time,
Validating.
I have not been able to trust my instincts, because whenever I trust my instincts and I say something, I tend to get slapped down. And
Mhm.
I'm beginning to realize, no, actually, my instincts are right. If I see
Yep.
a doctor and they're acting a little bit fishy, there's something going on. I know where
Yeah.
there's smoke, there's fire, and I need to have the courage of my convictions. But anyway, what were you saying? I interrupted
Oh, I
you.
just really like that. I think the idea that like you could be treated like a nuisance until your sort of intuition is proven right multiple times, and now you're not a nuisance anymore. Now you're like you know, what's the word where you blow the cover on everything? Dog whistler or
Yeah,
whatever.
whistleblower. Yeah, yeah.
Whistleblower, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I was just thinking it's really interesting on a personal note to me, but that also I, I mean, I don't know any other real way to put this. I did always feel that they were a part of a problematic group of people and mindsets in the fitness industry that they were like sort of in cahoots with. All around patriarchy, though. That's really where I thought about it. That was just what I
100%.
witnessed at the time. I never thought about weight or medical ethics. I just thought these are kind of like skeezy dudes who act like skeezy dudes and
Right.
exploit people in positions of you know, sort of inferiority in their systems. And that all feels super shitty to me. But I never thought about this aspect of like, well, what else is that kind of guy likely to do? Probably make millions of dollars off of writing bullshit, harmful drugs. Like, of
Right.
course.
And this is what I mean. We've learned, haven't we, that sometimes the most attractive and the most kind of effervescent and sort of seemingly kind of appealing people tend to be the most dangerous. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've learned over time that I'm generally friends now with people who are autistic and kind of maybe not as socially gregarious, but they're fucking trustworthy. Like I don't sit there worrying
Totally.
that this person is lying to my face. I feel much more comfortable.
Yeah.
Most of my friends are neurodivergent. Most of my friends are like the ones on the outside, the ones that are excluded, the ones that have never fit into society, because I have not only just an affinity, but I trust them.
Yeah.
And you're right. The people like the first thing I noticed with people like Lane and Dr. Nadolsky was looking at their pages and just thinking, this guy's a bit of a creep. I don't like that. I don't know
Totally.
just I'm sorry, but there's a bit of a creep. I don't
Do you
I don't
know,
like.
I'm realizing like in this moment somehow for the first time that how freaking unlikely it is for someone to be a bit of a creep or a bit of a pervert or a bit of a sexist and not also be all the other things. Like, it's just blowing my mind right now that I would ever think to myself, oh, I bet he's only just a bit sexist.
Yeah.
You know, like
Exactly.
why don't we immediately be like, oh, you're a bit sexist and like sort of inappropriate with younger women. Maybe let's assume a bunch of other stuff about you now.
Right, exactly.
Oh God.
And I think you can take that, that's a bit of wisdom that you can take with you when you meet doctors. I want you to look at them and know that they are oftentimes very flawed human beings, the kind of people you would not want to be friends with.
Yeah.
Not everybody, because some people like those kind of human beings, but often those of us who have been rejected by those human beings and who have been mistreated by the kind of people that hold all the power and hold all the the wealth and the popularity and are just like super popular people, you wouldn't want to be friends. I wouldn't want to be friends with them, and they're often the ones sitting in front of you in that lab coat. It takes more than
That's so interesting.
It takes much more than intelligence to get into medical school.
Mm-hmm.
Much more than intelligence, because let me tell you, I'm not that intelligent. I didn't do that well on my exams. I wasn't. It takes somebody who is willing to walk into that interview and ace that medical school interview. It takes somebody who is willing to basically say, I am the shit. And I can do this. And for me, a lot of it was having to prove myself. So I think that there are doctors that kind of like have been told you can't do this and they go into it. And that's what I mean. You look at, like, for example, I'll come back to Black doctors. Most of them are told not a chance. I don't know even why you're dreaming about being a doctor, because what are the chances that you'll become one? So there is that like absolute determination to prove everybody wrong. And that's what gets you in there, like just refusing to give up. And so that's what I mean. There are some great doctors who have that kind of sort of resilience. But guess what? Most of them burn out. They don't last. They cannot withstand the medical profession. The ones that are successful and the ones who do well are the ones that have a level of A, arrogance, or B, narcissism, or C, privilege. They will walk into the room and just turn around and be like, I am the shit, and therefore you will let me in. That's how you get into medical school. That's how you do well in medicine as well. You have to be the cocky one, the one that walks around, on medical student rounds and speaks up and gets into the feeling. And the way we're taught medicine is disgusting. I can remember like doing rounds, and you go from patient to patient, body to body, and doctors just like especially like the senior doctors, they'd be talking over these patients and asking so many inappropriate questions and so many things. And like you're taught to almost in order to succeed, to emulate that kind of a human being, like a pretty atrocious human being. And it's really bad. It's just people are not nice. My colleagues are not cool. And that's why I don't want to work in medicine anymore. It's actually not. I love the job so much. I can even handle the bureaucracy, which a lot of people can't handle. The paperwork, even that I can manage. But it's the colleagues that I just cannot face working with. And I have just never, I've collected a handful, and by a handful, I mean like 3 doctors in my entire career that I have kept in touch with. 3 doctors. I have worked in many hospitals and many practices, and there are 3. Nurses, got a ton of them in any other like allied profession, I got plenty of friends, but doctors, nah, thanks very much, but I'd rather not. So I think that says it all.
It's funny because you're in this really unique position where you can take the thing down from the inside. So I'm rooting for you to stay in the profession, but also can clearly see that might not be in your actual self-interest. So I guess I don't even know how to ask this question. Why do we trust doctors so much?
I don't know. It's a good question. You need to stop. All of us need to stop. And I understand how destabilizing that comment is, and how political that comment is, and how it
really is.
It is the equivalent of defund the police. It is the equivalent of don't trust your politicians, right? Because
but those two things just make sense to me, and this one feels new. I've never heard anybody be like defund the doctors. Obviously. You do, but we need to start doing that, and I think that's really important. One of my sort of passions is about making people understand that actually doctors are not trustworthy, and they have proven this over and over and over and over again. And what's really interesting is that whether or not I wish to pursue the medical profession or not is it's unlikely I'm going to be able to, because they will find a way to take my medical license away from me. But the only way that they can, I have no sort of black mark against my name in terms of my ability to safe practice. Like I've never done anything dangerous or wrong or criminal. So they say that I'm bringing the profession into disrepute. That's what I'm being accused of. It's a moral issue.
It's a moral issue. You're bringing the profession into disrepute.
That sucks.
But you see, I think actually they're proving my point, because they want to hold, this is what police officers do, this is what politicians do. They want to like secure ranks, right? They only investigate themselves. Who's investigating us? Who is holding us to account? Who is saying you can't do that? Nobody. We can do whatever we want, and you will never be able to stop us. At this point in time, we're untouchable. We're unstoppable. We can get away with literally, and I say this genuinely, murder. Sarah Jane was killed because her doctor hated fat people or didn't care about fat people. He had the responsibility of doing no harm, of working in her best interest, of respecting her autonomy, of practicing fairly and equally. But more importantly, his job was to protect her life. His job was to pick up that cancer. That was his job. And he failed her and he got away with it. And she hasn't even had so much as an apology from her doctor, not even an apology letter, not even a phone call. So what I'm saying here is that, police officers, they they shoot, like, white police officers shoot black men, unarmed black men, and we know that's wrong, and we say that's not okay, defund the police. Politicians, they lie, they commit all sorts of heinous acts, and we go, that's not okay. We need to hold these politicians to account. Why are we not saying this about doctors? They are getting away with shit. See, because I tell you why. You need to trust your doctors, because at the end of the day, we're the ones that are looking after your health. So
I think that's kind of it. It's like, well, I just give you total authority over me, I guess, because I don't want to die.
Right. So here's the thing, and this is this is what I want to sort of, it's very important to get the second part of the message across. You should not trust your doctors, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and see your doctors or shouldn't consult with doctors, because you need to consult. If you're sick, you need to consult with doctors. What I think we need to know is our rights. Because I think that, and it's complex. One of my best friends lives in Texas. She's a fat black woman living in Texas. And my advice to her is going to be very different to a white woman who lives in a blue state and has relatively good health insurance. My advice will always be different for these two people. But I would tell all people, you shouldn't necessarily trust your doctors just because they're doctors. You need to know what your rights are, and you need to know that your doctors are competent and capable of giving you the healthcare that you deserve, and that they are meeting their basic duty of care to you. So if you don't know what their duty of care to you is, then how do you know if they're meeting it? If you don't know what a competent doctor looks like, how do you know if they're competent? So I think it's more about educating people as to what they should expect and demand of their doctors. And I love watching my kind of, like, my clients that I work with. I love when it suddenly clicks and they're like, oh no, hang on, I got to take the power back. There's a huge power dynamic going on here, and I have the tools to take the power back. I just didn't know I had them. And so I spend a lot of my time teaching people how to basically get what they want out of doctors, how to not threaten doctors, but how to redress that power imbalance. So why do you trust your doctors? Because you've been told to, and because if you can't trust them, then what the hell are you going to do when you get sick?
I feel, thinking about it now, like the way that I have been taught to think about doctors anyway, I think a lot of us, is almost like the way kindergartners are thought to think about the teacher, right? It's like, it's an untouchable authority. It doesn't really matter why, they just are. And if you step out of line, you'll get in trouble. And so I feel like something I've done with a lot of clients is help them advocate to not be weighed. This is just a very simple thing. I know this is something you're also passionate about.
Correct.
But the shock and resistance that comes up when I say, you can tell them that you don't want to be, they say, oh no, I can't, it's automatic. And I'm like, right, but you can tell them that you don't want to be, or you refuse to be, and they're not going to pick you up and put you on the scale. You can't get in the kind of trouble you think you can here. They will not, hopefully, scream at you. They will not, whatever, you might get into some conflict, but there is just something about the feeling that we have of I'll be punished. I have to do whatever they say or I'll be punished. Yeah,
that's so true. And I feel that, by the way. I'm a doctor who is advocating, to, like you said, to never be weighed. And every time I go to see, at my diabetic clinic or whatever, the first thing they say is, we'd like to weigh you. And oh man, it's so hard to say no. I've just about got to the place where I can do it. But
what do you say? How do you phrase it personally?
I literally just go, no, I don't allow people to weigh me.
Nice.
And I think if that doesn't work, then sometimes I say I don't consent to being weighed, because consent is a big word in medicine.
I like that.
use the C word, use consent. I refuse my consent, or I don't consent to being weighed. Please
Don't
put
give
that
my
in it.
consent to be
Yeah.
weighed.
Because you see,
That's
the
a
thing
little
is,
tricky because it makes them uncomfortable, which I like.
yes, because you know what happens if they refuse to respect your consent? Do you know what the legal
They
term
get
is?
in trouble.
Yeah, but do you know what the legal term is?
Assault?
Assault.
Yeah.
So if they do not respect, and we know about consent, right? We've learned about consent in terms of, like, when I talk to people about consent, I often say, consent. You've learned about this now. We weren't very clued up on it a while ago, but most people have heard about consent when it comes to sex. And, so it's the same rules apply. You can't pressure someone. You can't keep harassing them. You can't ask them when they're incapacitated. You can't, like, the same rules of consent apply here. You can't just do something against someone's will. And this is not just the legal, but it's also like it's the foundation of our profession. So just say no to being weighed. But I think it goes beyond that. And I'm running a course, and I will continue to run this course. I'm super excited about this course because I'm looking at things like, what do you do when you get brushed off? What do you do when your doctor ignores your symptoms? What do you do when it gets blamed on your weight? What if they prescribe, like, weight loss? But actually having a script, and it's something I'm in the habit of giving people now, actual language to say to get what they want without being confrontational, without having to explain themselves.
That's brilliant.
I teach people consultation skills. I spent years learning consultation skills as a doctor, and now I spend my time teaching people consultation skills as a patient, which, by the way, I would be so happy if someone would put me out of business, because I don't want to teach that. It shouldn't be something that I should be teaching. Like, I'm not
it feels like there should be like a coach in this space or something. You're like, I'm a whole ass doctor. I have some stuff to do.
No. I don't mean it like that. I mean, nobody should have to be coached to go and see a fucking doctor.
Okay.
Outrageous. Like,
sure.
You're talking about advocating yourself with someone who is supposed to be advocating for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, what?
Yes. Okay.
It's like, it's the equivalent of saying, like, how do I advocate for myself when I go and see a lawyer? If you're hiring that lawyer to be your advocate, why do you need to learn to advocate for yourself with the lawyer? That's a
understood
job. So I am doing this job while simultaneously trying to put myself out of this job, because I want to help people.
I mean, same.
Yeah, right. We want to help people. We want to do what is necessary in this exact moment. But at the same time, it would be so great if we could make a world where this doesn't need to be done anymore. Where your rights are respected, where people don't weigh you, because really there is no need to weigh anyone in medicine. It's completely unnecessary. There's only a few instances where it is necessary, and that can be done in a very discreet kind of, like, just get on the scale, I measure it, like I measure blood pressure. We don't have to talk about it. Just look. And so I think that would be an ideal world. And until then, I will teach people how to basically consult with doctors in a way that they get what they want and they experience the least amount of harm. But it's literally this course. Like, imagine I am now running a course where week 1, I'm like, what do we do in this situation? What do we do in this situation? And it's a situation that most people find themselves in, but imagine the fact that I need to do a 6-week, to get my head around the fact that I need to do a 6-week course on this just blows my mind, how bad the medical profession is, how much we failed so many people. So and I think you should.
I'm just thinking how many people need to take this course. That's the real marker of how badly we failed people, is like how badly this is a needed skill. And I was actually going to ask you to clarify a little bit. So you're saying there's no medical reason to be weighed. I guarantee you there are listeners right now who are like, well, that can't be true. Could you speak to why that is a little bit, or push back against anyone who's sitting there being like, no, they have to. It's like important.
So the only times when you actually need to be weighed is if you're losing weight, because weight loss is never good. So we want to monitor that. If someone says I'm losing weight, I'm going to want to keep an eye on that. The second time is if you have end-stage kidney disease or end-stage heart failure, because at this point in time, we're trying to balance fluid. So it's not about weight, it's about fluid. And that requires a lot of weighing.
Yeah.
There are certain medications where we need to weigh you. The only ones really, I mean, obviously anesthesia is a classic one, but there are very few drugs that we have to do this. Children, sometimes we do need to weigh for antibiotics doses, but not often. But children, maybe more so. Adults, the only common one is if you're taking an oral blood thinner, like a tablet, not warfarin, but any of the newer ones, because we have to calculate something called the creatinine clearance, which is your kidney function, and we can't do that without a weight. So there are like a few instances when we absolutely need to weigh you, and those are very few and far between, because how many of us, and this is once a year, by the way, if you're on a weight blood thinner, not every time. All of the rest of the weighing, even with medications, is about monitoring weights and everything else. Every time someone weighs you, there's two reasons. One is because we're monitoring your weight, and the second is for insurance. And both of those are absolutely and utterly unnecessary and unethical, because there is never a reason to try to lose weight. I cannot stress this enough. But intentional weight loss is harmful and should never, ever, ever in the history of ever be recommended. That is not to say that we cannot encourage people to adopt different to make lifestyle changes, right?
100%.
We can do that. And actually, when we're talking about lifestyle changes, it's really important that the lifestyle changes people are making are causing more harm than good. And I need to clarify that by saying, say I tell you I want you to exercise, because exercise is good for you. And there are so many reasons to exercise. Exercise is good for, flexibility. It's good for posture. It's good for, preventing back pain. It's good for when you've had a shoulder injury. It's good for your mood. I can list all the different reasons why one should exercise, right? But that's because it benefits you. Now, it shouldn't be harming you. And for some people, it is really harmful. If you have chronic pain, sometimes exercise is worse than it is better. If you are, if you're disabled and you are, for example, have chronic fatigue or ME or whatever, actually sometimes long COVID, classic example, exercise might actually be causing you more harm than good. And most importantly, if exercise is becoming a form of disordered eating exercise, and is part of, it's feeding into a mental health issue, if it's causing you to feel depressed, if it's causing you to have low self-esteem, if it becomes like a punishment more than a joy, then exercise is not in your best interest. And so there are plenty of other lifestyle intentional lifestyle kind of changes that you can make that have nothing to do with exercise. So when we're making lifestyle recommendations, we have to be very intelligent about it. But that still has nothing to do with weight. Because notice that I gave you a whole list of reasons to exercise, but weight loss is not one of them. In fact, it's the only reason you shouldn't exercise. Do not exercise for weight loss, ever. It's the the stupidest thing you could possibly...
Listen to them. They're a doctor, everybody.
It's
official.
It's official. And weight loss is dangerous. It is harmful. It is going, and there is never a reason why we should be prescribing weight loss, ever, ever, ever. I've just not found one, and I've challenged many people to give me a good reason yet to find one. I found plenty of reasons why you shouldn't do it. So lifestyle changes, sure, but that's not the same as weight loss. And so if we're not going to tell people to lose weight, why on earth do we need to weigh them? Like, what's the purpose, right? I don't know. No, I don't know either.
Just to make people feel bad, I think.
It's correct, but also for insurance. And I've heard this actually, I guess more in the States, but for here, you can't get certain insurance, life insurance, et cetera, will cost more money if you are a heavier weight. So I always say to people, that's another reason not to let people weigh you, because then they don't know. And here, often they'll say, you are not entitled to this or that if you're over a certain weight. Well, if they can't weigh you, technically, they cannot exclude you, right?
I didn't know that. I would assume they could exclude you.
How?
I don't know. Just
be
mad at you for breaking the rules. It's this like good kid mentality. Like you have to follow the teacher's orders.
And of course they can, and they will. Don't get me wrong. They will try to exclude you. but you have a means of pushing back. You have a way of saying, actually, this goes against my human rights. This goes against my duty, your duty of care. I refuse my consent for you to weigh me, and I refuse for you to deny me surgery because of my weight. And so we have, and look, this has not been easy. I've had some success with clients. I haven't had that much success, but I help write these complaint letters. I help write these appeals. I help write these, if someone says to you, you can't have the surgery, I will sit down with you and I will help you write that appeal. Whether or not we'll be successful the first time, probably not, but we can keep pushing, and we can keep, because we have the law behind us. We have medical ethics behind us. There's a surgeon, I just saw an article, someone pointed it out in 2017, when we were denying certain patients surgery, basic surgeries, non-urgent surgeries, based on their weight alone. The head of the second in command of the Royal College of Surgeons, which is a big deal in the UK, wrote an article and said, that's absolutely unethical. You can't do that. That's wrong. So we have people who aren't fat, who are saying, big, important people saying, oh my God, that's ethically unacceptable. But we're just getting away with it because no one's challenging us. That's all it is. Because
there's no accountability.
There's no accountability. The more we challenge, and so, gosh, again, I would very much like to be able to put myself out of business, because why would anybody need to challenge a rule that shouldn't exist in the first place? Then I look around and I go, well, in half of the US now, you can't get an abortion. So, there are certain things that it should come as standard and just don't in the world anymore. So we have to fight. And that's what I'm here for, to help you fight, because I get how hard it is to fight on your own.
Ash, I had like 30 questions written down. I didn't even get to. This was such an interesting conversation. I could talk to you for hours. Holy crap. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to say first before we start wrapping it up?
No. Well, here's a question. How long until this comes out?
I don't know yet.
But will
I'm
it be
an organized person?
That's
within the next couple of weeks, probably.
Okay. So, I'm assuming you won't have had time until next Friday. Please don't put this out before next Friday, because I'm going to announce.
I will not.
A big announcement, and you can say it's going to get announced here first if you like.
Okay.
Or, I announced it here first. I'm writing a book. It's called Weight Loss Injections. Oh my God, what did I entitle it? I should really know. Weight Loss Injections, Game Changer or Long Con. That's the name of the book.
Yes.
It's the first book of many. I plan to bring out as many as I can. I've wanted to write the book for a really long time. And then I realized that the book is going to take me 6 months to write. And so, but at the same time, people were asking me, like, where can I find this written down? Like, I hear what you're saying, but where is it? And I'm like, oh, my podcast or here or there. But actually, people like a book. So people still love a book. They like to be able to read, and
the world needs your books. I love this.
So I'm bringing out my first one. It's on weight loss injections, just because that's what's been in the news at the moment. And I will have just run my masterclass. I'm announcing it at my masterclass, which is this Friday, and it will have gone by the time you publish this. But I'm doing a masterclass on weight loss injections. I'm going to talk to people about this book, because I just want people to be able to have a book that really you can read in like less than half a day. It's going to be, it's me talking like me. It's not a sciencey book. Lots of science in it, but you will basically hear my voice and my sweariness and my big mouth.
Love
and big
it.
But it's all about weight loss drugs, and not just the drugs themselves, but also the history of how they came into being, and the very much unethical practices of doctors and pharmaceutical companies, etc. So if you like a book, come and find it. It'll be probably in my website. I might be able to publish it on Amazon. I don't know yet. We'll see. But it will definitely be available on my website. And there'll be many more. So I'm going to be doing lots of masterclasses coming up. I've got a diabetes one planned. I've got I don't know how I'm going to word this exactly, because it's like gynecology. It's not women's health, because that's what we call it, but it's not women's health. But it's going to cover things like endometriosis, and I'm going to do one on polycystic ovarian syndrome. Somebody wanted me to do one on menopause. I'm going to do one on joint pain, but I'm going to keep coming back to, how doctors are either prescribing or denying their patients certain things.
I have
based on things.
premenstrual dysphoria disorder. I would read a book on that too.
Oh,
And all
really?
of the ways in which the people with the treatment power basically make you feel like an insane person.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, the intersection between ableism and fat and weight stigma and misogyny and
Yeah.
that, my goodness, it's really interesting. I was talking to someone, I know you want to wrap up, but
Oh, that's okay. Keep going.
one of my clients is in Canada, and we were chatting about chronic pain. And I had mistakenly got into arguments on Twitter with people about MAID, which is medically assisted dying, right, in Canada, thinking that, you know, in the UK, this is something that we're fighting for and we can't get. And there are a lot of disabled people who are saying, I have the right to die the way that I want to die. Stop taking my right away from me. But in Canada, you can. And I thought this was a good thing. But then I learned, and I was so horrified by this, that people with chronic pain cannot access the drugs that they need. So in the UK, if someone has chronic pain, like, you know, and it's chronic, this is not just acute pain, this is chronic pain. You know, we do all sorts of things, lifestyle treatments, blah, blah, blah. But we'll also start off with basic things like Tylenol and anti-inflammatories. And then we'll get to a point where we're like, okay, we're going to have to use opioids because that's what they're there for. Right. And we do. And we give them at the lowest dose possible, and we try not to get people addicted. But if you're in chronic pain and it doesn't go away, you need pain relief. So that's what we give you. And we will do it in an ethical and safe way. And we make sure that people don't, you know, abuse drugs. We don't particularly, we've not had an opioid crisis in the UK. That's because we've never had one. And this doesn't exist.
That's so weird.
No,
I didn't know that.
No. And you want to know why we don't have an opioid crisis in the UK?
I don't know, because everyone is better than the United States right now at everything.
No, nothing to do with that. The US is a great country, but one of the problems with the US is the free market when it comes to pharmaceutical industries. We don't have an opioid problem here because we never had an oxy problem here, and we didn't have an oxy problem here because they never got oxy licensed. You have an opioid problem because of OxyContin. You didn't have an opioid problem until OxyContin. We don't have OxyContin. I've only ever been able to prescribe OxyContin for people who are dying. So, because there's no oxy, we haven't had a major problem with fentanyl or any of the other drugs of abuse. And as a result, we don't deny our patients the right to pain relief. Right. But I was saying to my patient, like, well, what do you do when you go to a doctor and you say, I'm in pain? And they go, I can't give you, because I would just give cocodamol. And, you know, when we were talking about drugs, I thought she was talking like fentanyl. And she was like, no, just cocodamol. I give these out literally in doses of 100. I cannot give them in smaller boxes. It comes in 100 at a time. So I don't give them out willy-nilly, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about chronic pain here. So of course I prescribe pain relief for chronic pain in the most ethical and safe way possible, with lots of things in place to prevent addiction, but also accepting that if opioids are the only thing that we can give you for your pain, then we're going to have to give them to you. So what really horrified me was how people are made to feel like, A, it's all in the head, B, they're just they're being big babies about it. See, there's just nothing we can do, which is not true. There's plenty of things you can do, but the law makes it so you can't. And also the whole like kind of like, oh, you're a woman, you know, you're a woman, and so it's, you know, that kind of like women tend to be hypochondriacs and hysterical, because we know that hysterical comes from hysteria, which comes from the womb. So it's amazing how much of this shit still exists in medicine. And so what we have is this intersection of ableism, because people don't believe people who are in chronic pain or have like chronic fatigue or any of these other symptoms that are not physically visible on the human body. They don't, you know, they tend to be worse towards women or sort of minority genders. They tend to be worse towards fat people. So this is like massive intersection of all this stuff. So it doesn't surprise me when you say, oh, you know, they just blame you, and they say it's all in your head. And also this happens all the time. Again, another reason not to trust doctors, right? Like they're literally gaslighting you. You're going, it really hurts. And they're going, no, it really doesn't. And that's gaslighting.
I had a doctor like just basically suggest exercise essentially for like a list of symptoms a mile long. And also like one of them was the inability to get out of bed. So the thought of like getting up and exercising was just a charming suggestion. And yeah, it absolutely did make me feel like if men experienced this shit, like, oh my God, it would be so different. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, the misogyny, the you know, the transphobia, the homophobia, the race, of course, the racism. I mean, let's not forget that. So yeah, like I said, doctors aren't great. If you take nothing else away from this,
I might make that the name of the episode. Doctors aren't great with Dr. Asher Larmie. I like that actually.
Let's do that.
Okay, so where can people find you? You've got this book coming out. What's your website? What's your Instagram, wherever you can send people?
So you'll find me at fatdoctor.co.uk. That's the best place to find me. Go to my website first. Everything that I'm doing is on there. And you can also find all my socials on there. So just www.fatdoctor.co.uk. And the only other thing is they have the hashtag No Way campaign. So far, it's been less of a campaign and more of a website. That's just because I have no idea how to make a campaign. But I think that we're going to do something about that. And I think people like you just are already doing it, which is basically saying to people, stop letting them weigh you. It's the most simple and effective way to take some of that power back. Just go, nah, thank you.
I don't know how you feel about this, because I'm very I get a little Robin Hoodie with my ethics sometimes, but I feel that it is totally okay to lie in order to do self-advocacy work. And so I have asked clients to straight up lie when they felt like it was impossible to challenge. Oh, I don't want to be weighed. I'd rather not be weighed. It felt too soft and they were afraid of getting pushback. They didn't feel like they could handle it. So I have just suggested straight up start with, I have an eating disorder and I can't be weighed.
Right.
And whether or not that's true, it makes it final enough, like the word I don't consent. It makes it sound official enough that you're going to get less pushback, which means you might actually be able to get what you need.
I have zero issues with the ethics or morality of that. You carry on. That seems very reasonable. Very reasonable. I have lied way more than that in my own.
Sure. Yeah. I do it with a lot of the self-advocacy work just in general too, because like people are not necessarily going to sit there and listen to you explain to them how actually everything they thought about weight and health and fatness is all wrong and blah, blah, blah. Instead, you can just be like, oh, well, I have an eating disorder, so that comment is actually really dangerous for me. And that hands all the discomfort of the weird comment right back to the person who said it.
Yeah, that's great. And a lot of these skills, like I said, they're skills we have to learn. And so if you are someone who's thinking to themselves, I could really do with going on that course, again, find me on my website and Yes, find me on my website. I will help you. I will teach you how to do that stuff so that you know that you walk into your next consultation with a doctor or any other healthcare professional and you have the language. And I always say to people, write it down, like literally take a printout, because people often have their notes with them or have like a printout. That's quite normal for us. We're very used to that with people coming in with notes, but bring a script and literally with like, if they say this is what I say back. And I also teach people how to present their complaint, their symptoms, to present it in a way that will get the best response from the doctor. Again, what a load of crap. Like my job is literally, I got taught, educated. I spent years learning how to extract that information in a consultation, how to efficiently and effectively withdraw out all the important stuff without painting the narrative by asking too many closed questions. I had to pass exams and people watched me. In fact, I spent like thousands on these exams that I went and people watched me protect with these actors that would come in and there'd be a patient and I had to have, listen to them and talk to them. That's my job. And unfortunately, doctors just seem to have like passed these exams and forgotten all about it. So now I'm teaching people how to literally, I've reversed it. I've essentially reversed it and now teaching people how to do what their doctors are failing to do. So this is a course that I'm offering for everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. I'll do different times for different groups of people because I know that I've got probably about as many people from Europe as I do from the US and North America. So yeah,
I love the way it's like restoring the power to the people, and it just is so good. I want to like collaborate with you on everything forever. I'm so excited about your work. I suggest that anybody who has ever struggled with advocacy in the medical space, go take your courses, whatever they are. because this feels so, so empowering and so important for liberation on every front. This whole episode has been. So thank you so much
Pleasure.
for being here and just for the incredible work that you do. Everybody who is listening, you know where to find me, jessineeland.com and at Jessie Neeland for, everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. That is it. And thank you for listening, and I will catch you next week.